The people who betray you rarely expect to see you standing taller on the other side. The crystal chandeliers above the Grand Astoria ballroom scattered warm light across hundreds of smiling faces. But to Adrian Brooks, the room suddenly felt colder than a January morning in Chicago. Every carefully arranged flower, every polished glass, every congratulatory handshake had been prepared to celebrate the future he believed he was building with Logan Mercer, the alpha fiancé he had trusted with every quiet dream he had ever dared to keep. Friends laughed over champagne. A string quartet filled the air with elegant melodies, and cameras flashed as influential families gathered beneath towering white roses to witness what everyone called the engagement of the season. Adrian adjusted the cuff of his tailored navy suit and searched the crowd for Logan, expecting the familiar, reassuring smile that had carried him through months of planning. Instead, he found whispers. Eyes shifted away the moment they met his. Conversations stopped too quickly. An uneasy silence rippled through the room before Logan finally stepped onto the stage, but he did not walk alone. Standing beside him was another Omega, dressed in ivory, wearing the expression of someone who already believed he belonged there. Adrian felt the air leave his lungs as Logan reached for the stranger's hand instead of his. The microphone amplified every word with painful clarity. Logan spoke calmly, thanking everyone for attending before announcing that circumstances had changed and that his future would be shared with someone else. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Adrian remained perfectly still, unable to reconcile the gentle man he had loved with the stranger speaking so effortlessly about replacing him. No explanation followed. No apology. Only carefully chosen words about compatibility, family expectations, and difficult decisions. Some guests looked away with sympathy, while others quietly accepted the spectacle as another transaction among powerful families. Adrian's heart broke without making a sound. He lowered his eyes, refusing to let anyone watch him cry. The diamond ring in his pocket suddenly felt heavier than stone. Without creating a scene, he turned toward the grand entrance and walked away from the life he thought had been waiting for him. Outside, rain drifted across the empty avenue, soft enough to blur the city lights into streaks of silver. He stepped into the cool night without opening the umbrella still resting beneath his arm. Every block he walked placed another layer of distance between himself and the ballroom, but none of it quieted the questions racing through his mind. Had every promise been rehearsed? Had every smile been borrowed? His phone buzzed again and again with calls he refused to answer. Family members, friends, reporters, none of them mattered anymore. For the first time in years, Adrian had nowhere he wanted to go. He stopped beneath a street lamp, letting the rain collect along his sleeves as traffic rolled quietly past. Then the deep growl of a powerful black sedan slowed beside the curb. The rear passenger door opened before anyone stepped out. A composed voice, low and unmistakably confident, cut through the rain. Adrian Brooks? He looked toward the vehicle, confused. A sharply dressed driver stood beside the open door with perfect composure. Mr. Damian Calloway would like to speak with you. Adrian had never met the alpha mafia boss whose name carried equal measures of admiration and caution throughout the city. Yet as he stared into the warm interior of the waiting car, he realized something impossible. At the exact moment his old life collapsed, another had quietly arrived to meet him. Adrian hesitated for only a heartbeat before stepping into the waiting sedan. The door closed with a quiet, solid sound that shut out the rain, the traffic, and the echoes of the ballroom he had left behind. The interior carried the subtle scent of cedar and fresh leather, refined without feeling extravagant. Across from him sat Damian Calloway. He wore a charcoal suit without a single wrinkle, his posture relaxed yet unmistakably composed. His sharp features remained unreadable, but his steady gaze carried none of the pity Adrian had seen on countless faces only minutes earlier. Damian did not offer empty comfort or meaningless apologies. Instead, he simply extended a neatly folded handkerchief across the space between them. Adrian accepted it after a brief pause, realizing only then that rainwater had mixed with the tears he had been trying so hard to hide. "Thank you," he said quietly. Damian gave a slight nod before speaking in an even voice. "You have had a difficult evening. You do not owe me an explanation." The words surprised Adrian more than any dramatic speech could have. Silence settled comfortably inside the vehicle as the city lights drifted across the windows like passing stars. After several blocks, Damien finally spoke again. I was attending a meeting nearby when I received a call about what happened at the hotel. Adrian looked up, confused. You know who I am? Damien's expression remained calm. People in my position tend to hear important news very quickly. Adrian almost laughed at the understatement. Damien Calloway's reputation reached nearly every corner of the city. Newspapers described him as an influential businessman. Financial magazines praised his strategic investments. Rumors painted a far more mysterious picture, connecting his name to an organization built on loyalty, discretion, and influence. Yet none of those stories matched the quiet man sitting before him now. Why stop for me? Adrian finally asked. Damien looked out the window for a moment before answering. Because I dislike seeing capable people abandoned by those who never deserve them. The response lingered in Adrian's mind. It did not sound rehearsed. It sounded personal. The sedan eventually entered a private road lined with towering oak trees whose branches formed a canopy above the pavement. Beyond ornate security gates stood the Calloway estate, an elegant stone residence overlooking acres of perfectly maintained gardens. It felt less like a fortress and more like an old family home preserved with extraordinary care. As the vehicle rolled to a stop beneath the covered entrance, several staff members quietly opened umbrellas without unnecessary ceremony. No one stared at Adrian. No one whispered. They greeted him with the same calm professionalism they offered Damien. Inside, warm lighting reflected across polished hardwood floors and walls decorated with timeless artwork rather than displays of wealth. Damien removed his coat and handed it to an attendant before turning back toward Adrian. A guest suite has been prepared, he said. Adrian blinked in surprise. Prepared? You expected me to come. For the first time that evening, the faintest hint of a smile appeared at the corner of Damien's mouth. No, he replied. I simply believe that every decision becomes easier after a safe place to rest. Before Adrian could respond, an older gentleman approached with measured steps and offered Damien a sealed envelope marked with the Calloway family crest. Damien opened it, scanned the contents, and the warmth in his expression disappeared almost instantly. He folded the paper once before looking directly at Adrian. It appears, he said quietly, that your broken engagement was never the real story. Someone began planning tonight long before either of us realized it. Adrian barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the ballroom returned in perfect detail, the glittering lights, the quiet whispers, and the moment his future dissolved before an audience that had applauded only minutes earlier. Dawn arrived wrapped in pale gold sunlight that poured through the tall windows of the guest suite. For a brief second he forgot where he was, but the unfamiliar room quickly reminded him that nothing about his life was the same anymore. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. A house attendant entered carrying breakfast on a polished wooden tray along with a handwritten note. The elegant script contained only one sentence. Join me in the library when you are ready. There is something you deserve to know. Damien. Adrian followed the directions through quiet hallways lined with family portraits and shelves filled with old books rather than displays of wealth. Every corner of the estate reflected discipline, history, and restraint. When he reached the library, Damien was standing beside a large window overlooking the gardens, reading several documents spread neatly across a long oak table. He looked up as Adrian entered and motioned toward an empty chair. Please sit. Adrian noticed photographs, financial reports, and newspaper clippings arranged with remarkable precision. None of them appeared random. Damien folded his hands calmly before speaking. Last night was not an emotional decision made in a single moment. It was the final move in a plan that began months ago. Adrian frowned. What do you mean? Damien slid one document across the table. It showed a business partnership announcement between the Mercer family and another influential corporation, dated nearly 6 months earlier. Another file contained records of private meetings. Another listed engagement planning expenses that had quietly stopped weeks before the ceremony. Adrian stared at the papers in disbelief. The engagement continued because ending it publicly created greater value than ending it privately. Damien explained without raising his voice. Your trust became part of someone else's negotiation. Adrian felt a familiar ache settle across his chest, but this time it was different. The pain was no longer fueled by confusion. It was slowly being replaced by clarity. "So, I was never the problem," he whispered. Damien met his eyes steadily. "No, you were convenient." The truth landed with unexpected force. Adrian looked away toward the garden where early morning wind moved gently through rows of white flowers. He had spent the entire night wondering what he had done wrong, searching every memory for a mistake that could explain Logan's betrayal. Now he realized he had been searching for an answer that had never belonged to him. Damien quietly gathered the papers before continuing. "I have another reason for showing you this." Adrian looked back. "Why?" Damien's expression remained composed. "Because whoever organized this believed you would disappear quietly afterward." Adrian remained silent. Damien continued. "Instead, you accepted my invitation. That changes their expectations." Before Adrian could respond, the library doors opened. A distinguished woman in a tailored navy suit entered with a digital tablet in her hands. "Mr. Calloway," she said respectfully, "the photographs from last night are everywhere." She turned the screen toward them. Every major news outlet displayed the same image. Adrian stepping into Damien Calloway's black sedan beneath the rain, while cameras captured the moment from every angle. Headlines speculated endlessly about their connection. Some called it a mystery. Others called it an alliance. One headline simply asked, "Who is the Omega beside Damien Calloway?" Adrian looked at Damien with growing uncertainty. Damien studied the headlines for a long moment before quietly closing the tablet. "Whether we intended it or not," he said, "the entire city now believes we have chosen each other." Adrian stared at the tablet long after the screen had gone dark. A single photograph had rewritten the story the entire city believed. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had been the abandoned fiancé everyone pitied. Now every headline linked his name to Damien Calloway, a man whose influence reached boardrooms, charities, and circles that rarely welcomed outsiders. "I never agreed to any of this," Adrian said quietly. Damien did not argue. Instead, he poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one in front of Adrian. "Neither did I," he replied. Public perception often moves faster than the truth. Adrian let out a slow breath. "Then tell everyone they are wrong." Damien looked toward the garden beyond the library windows before answering. "If I deny the rumors today, reporters will spend weeks searching for reasons. If I remain silent, they will lose interest much sooner. Sometimes silence is the shortest path through unnecessary noise." Adrian considered the answer. It was practical, not manipulative. Even so, he struggled to accept becoming the center of conversations he had never invited. Before either of them spoke again, the estate manager entered with the day's schedule. Damien listened carefully, confirmed several meetings, then calmly canceled every appointment after noon. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "You are changing your entire schedule because of me?" Damien folded the schedule and placed it aside. "Because someone who has just watched his life change deserves time to find solid ground." The simple statement carried more kindness than any dramatic promise. Later, that morning, Damien offered to show Adrian the estate. They walked through quiet hallways that opened into sunlit courtyards, a restored greenhouse filled with rare orchids, and a private library that seemed older than the city itself. Employees greeted Damien with genuine respect rather than fear, and each of them acknowledged Adrian with the same courtesy. No one asked uncomfortable questions. No one treated him like an unexpected guest. The atmosphere felt surprisingly normal. During lunch, they sat on a terrace overlooking a peaceful lake where ducks drifted across the water. Adrian finally asked the question that had lingered in his mind since the night before. "People say many things about you. How much of it is true?" Damien smiled faintly. "People often confuse influence with mystery. I prefer to let my work speak louder than rumors." Adrian nodded slowly. That answer somehow fit the man far better than any headline ever could. As the afternoon sunlight stretched across the gardens, Adrian found himself relaxing for the first time since the engagement disaster. The constant pressure inside his chest eased just enough for him to remember who he had been before the betrayal defined him. He even laughed quietly when one of the estate's golden retrievers insisted on following him from one path to another, earning an amused glance from Damien. The peaceful moment lasted until a security officer approached with measured urgency and handed Damien a sealed folder. Damien reviewed the contents without changing his expression, then passed a single page to Adrian. It contained a guest list for an exclusive charity gala scheduled 3 nights later. Logan Mercer's name appeared near the top. Directly beneath it, another line had just been added. Damien Calloway. +1. Adrian looked up in confusion. Damien met his eyes with calm certainty. The invitation arrived this morning, he said. Every influential family in the city will attend. If you walk into that ballroom beside me, the story they wrote about you will end, and a completely different one will begin. Adrian held the invitation between his fingers long after Damien left the terrace. The elegant cream paper felt surprisingly heavy, as though accepting it meant accepting a future he could not yet imagine. 3 days earlier, his greatest concern had been choosing flowers for an engagement celebration. Now he was being asked to stand beside one of the most influential alphas in the city before the very people who had witnessed his humiliation. Every instinct told him to disappear, yet another quiet voice inside reminded him that hiding would only allow others to keep defining his story. That afternoon, Damien invited Adrian into a private conference room where several trusted advisors had gathered around a large table. Digital screens displayed company reports, charity initiatives, and upcoming public events. Adrian expected discussions filled with intimidating strategies, but instead he watched Damien patiently listen to every opinion before making thoughtful decisions. No one rushed to speak over another person. No one competed for attention. The atmosphere was built on respect rather than fear. Adrian remained silent, observing details others overlooked. One financial projection on a presentation screen did not match the supporting numbers listed in an attached report. After hesitating for several moments, he quietly pointed toward the discrepancy. The room became still. One analyst reviewed the figures again before blinking in surprise. He is right, she admitted. The projection imported an outdated data set. Damien looked toward Adrian with genuine interest instead of disbelief. How did you notice it so quickly? Adrian offered a modest smile. My father taught me that small inconsistencies usually lead to much larger problems if nobody asks questions. Several advisors exchanged impressed glances. Damien simply nodded. A valuable habit. The meeting continued, and Adrian found himself contributing another observation about a charity partnership that could improve community outreach without increasing the budget. By the time the session ended, the people around the table no longer viewed him as an unexpected guest. They thanked him for his perspective with sincere professionalism. As they walked through the hallway afterward, Adrian looked at Damien with quiet confusion. Why did you let me speak? You barely know me. Damien answered without slowing his pace. Because good ideas should never depend on titles, and because I prefer to judge people by what they contribute rather than what others say about them. The words settled deeply in Adrian's heart. For the first time since the engagement collapsed, someone had recognized his abilities instead of his heartbreak. That evening, they shared a simple dinner overlooking the gardens as the sun disappeared beyond the trees. Conversation came naturally, touching on books, architecture, travel, and childhood memories rather than painful subjects. Adrian realized hours had passed without thinking about Logan even once. The discovery surprised him more than anything else. Just as the meal ended, Damien's assistant entered carrying a slim folder marked confidential. She quietly placed it beside Damien before leaving the room. Damien opened the file, studied several pages, then slid one document across the table to Adrian. It contained copies of private messages, business schedules, and signed agreements that connected Logan's family to a carefully planned corporate merger months before the engagement had ended. Adrian slowly read every page until one sentence caught his attention. His own name appeared beside a note describing him as a useful public symbol whose presence would improve investor confidence until the merger became official. Adrian lowered the document with trembling hands, unable to believe what he had just read. Damien's voice remained calm, but unmistakably certain. You were never betrayed because you lacked value, he said softly. You were betrayed because someone wanted to use your value without ever appreciating the person you truly are. The documents remained on the table long after dinner ended, but Adrian no longer felt the need to read them again. Every page confirmed what his heart had already begun to accept. The future he had imagined with Logan had never truly existed. Strangely, that realization did not leave him feeling emptier. It left him feeling free. The following morning arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. Adrian found himself wandering through the estate's gardens before sunrise, enjoying the quiet paths that wound between flowering hedges and ancient oak trees. For the first time in days, his thoughts were not trapped in the past. He noticed the careful landscaping, the gentle sound of the fountain, and the peaceful rhythm of a place that seemed untouched by the noise beyond its gates. As he reached the greenhouse, he found Damien already there, trimming a small collection of orchids with remarkable patience. Adrian smiled with surprise. "I did not expect this to be your morning routine." Damien looked up with a calm expression. Business decisions become easier after spending a little time caring for something that cannot be rushed. Adrian stepped closer, watching the delicate work. "I never imagined someone with your reputation would enjoy gardening." Damien chuckled softly. "Most reputations are written by people who have never shared breakfast with the person they describe." The unexpected humor made Adrian laugh, and the sound echoed warmly through the glass walls of the greenhouse. It was the first genuine laugh he had shared since his world changed. They spent the next hour walking through the estate, speaking about ordinary things that somehow felt extraordinary, because neither of them needed to pretend. Adrian spoke about studying architecture in college and how he loved buildings that balanced beauty with purpose. Damien admitted that every renovation on the estate had been personally reviewed because he believed spaces should make people feel safe before they impressed them. The conversation flowed naturally, interrupted only by comfortable silences that required no explanation. Later that afternoon, Damien invited Adrian to review the seating arrangements for the upcoming charity gala. Several event planners gathered around a large table covered with diagrams of the ballroom. Adrian quietly examined the layout before pointing toward one section. "If the sponsors are seated here, guests entering through the main doors will never see them until after they are seated. Moving them closer to the entrance would increase visibility without changing the schedule." The planners exchanged thoughtful looks before quickly comparing the suggestion with the existing design. One of them smiled with clear admiration. "That is a much stronger arrangement." Damien looked at Adrian with quiet approval. "You continue noticing what everyone else overlooks." Adrian shrugged modestly. "Sometimes people become so focused on complicated solutions that they forget to look at the simple ones." As the meeting concluded, several staff members thanked Adrian for his help. Their appreciation felt sincere, and he realized something had changed. He was no longer walking through the estate as someone seeking shelter. He was becoming part of the conversations that shaped it. That evening, while the sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and amber, Adrian stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens. Damien joined him without speaking, handing him a warm cup of tea. They watched the fading light in peaceful silence until Adrian finally said, "Thank you for treating me like I still have something to offer." Damien answered without hesitation, "I never believed you had lost it." Before Adrian could respond, Damien's phone vibrated. He glanced at the message, his expression growing thoughtful rather than alarmed. After a brief pause, he turned the screen toward Adrian. A trusted contact at the charity gala had confirmed that Logan had personally requested a seat directly across from Damien's reserved table, ensuring that their first meeting since the broken engagement would happen in front of every influential guest in attendance. The evening of the charity gala arrived beneath a clear autumn sky, and the city shimmered with anticipation. Black cars lined the entrance of the historic Hamilton Conservatory, where business leaders, philanthropists, and influential families gathered beneath elegant lights that reflected across polished marble floors. Adrian stood quietly in the entrance hall of the Callaway estate, adjusting the sleeve of his perfectly tailored midnight blue suit. It was understated, refined, and chosen to reflect confidence rather than extravagance. For a brief moment, he caught his own reflection in the mirror and almost failed to recognize the man looking back. Only a few days earlier, he had walked away from a broken engagement, believing his future had disappeared. Now he saw someone who had begun rebuilding it one decision at a time. Damien entered moments later wearing a classic black tuxedo that matched his calm presence. He looked at Adrian for a second before offering a small approving smile. "You look like someone who finally remembers his own worth." Adrian answered with a quiet laugh. "I am still working on believing it." Damien nodded. "That is enough." The drive to the gala passed in comfortable silence. Neither of them discussed Logan, the rumors, or the headlines that had continued circulating throughout the week. Instead, they spoke about the charity foundation the event would support and the students whose scholarships would benefit from the evening's donations. The conversation reminded Adrian that the night represented more than social appearances. When the sedan stopped beneath the grand entrance, photographers immediately turned toward the arriving vehicle. Camera flashes illuminated the red carpet as Damien stepped out first before calmly offering his hand. Adrian accepted without hesitation. Together, they walked toward the entrance with quiet confidence. Murmurs spread through the crowd almost instantly. Reporters lowered their voices. Guests exchanged surprised glances. Every person present remembered the engagement scandal, yet no one expected Adrian Brooks to arrive beside Damian Calloway, looking composed instead of defeated. Inside the ballroom, the conversations softened as dozens of eyes followed them across the polished floor. Adrian felt the attention surrounding him, but something had changed inside him during the past several days. He no longer measured his value through other people's approval. Damian greeted several guests with polite professionalism before introducing Adrian simply by his name, never as someone needing protection or explanation. That simple gesture spoke louder than any public statement. As they approached their table, Adrian noticed Logan standing across the room, speaking with several investors. Logan turned casually toward the entrance, expecting another distinguished arrival, but the moment his eyes met Adrian's, his expression froze. Surprise quickly gave way to disbelief. The confident smile disappeared from his face as he noticed Damian standing comfortably beside Adrian. Conversations around Logan slowed as people quietly followed his gaze. Adrian remained calm. He neither looked away nor sought confrontation. He simply continued walking beside Damian with steady composure. Several respected business leaders greeted Adrian warmly after recognizing him from recent news coverage, asking thoughtful questions about architecture, community development, and charitable projects rather than the broken engagement. Adrian answered each conversation with quiet intelligence, gradually earning genuine respect from people who had never spoken with him before. Across the ballroom, Logan watched every interaction unfold, clearly realizing that the narrative he believed he controlled was slipping beyond his reach. Just as the orchestra announced the beginning of the evening's opening ceremony, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage with a welcoming smile and made an unexpected announcement. "Tonight," he declared, "before our first presentation, we have invited one special guest to share a few words about the future of community partnership." Adrian felt the room become perfectly still as the presenter looked directly toward him and said, "Mr. Adrian Brooks, the stage is yours." Adrian felt every eye in the ballroom settle upon him as he rose from his chair. For a single moment, the memories of the engagement ceremony threatened to return, but this time they carried no power over him. He walked toward the stage with measured confidence, not because he believed he had become fearless, but because he had finally learned that courage often arrived after heartbreak rather than before it. The applause greeting him was polite and curious. Standing beneath the soft lights, Adrian looked across the audience filled with executives, philanthropists, and community leaders before speaking in a calm, steady voice. "A few days ago, I believed success meant having every detail of my future carefully planned. I was wrong. Sometimes the greatest opportunities begin the moment life forces us to let go of plans that were never truly ours." The ballroom became remarkably quiet. Adrian continued by speaking about the importance of community investment, educational opportunities, and creating environments where people could contribute according to their abilities instead of their titles. His words came from genuine experience rather than polished performance, and the audience responded with growing admiration. When he finished, the applause was warmer than before, lasting long enough for several guests to stand in appreciation. As Adrian stepped away from the podium, the chairman of the foundation approached with a welcoming smile. "Mr. Brooks," he announced into the microphone, "our board has unanimously decided to invite you to join our Community Development Advisory Council. Your perspective reflects exactly the kind of leadership we hope to encourage." Another round of applause filled the ballroom. Adrian accepted with sincere gratitude, still processing the unexpected honor. Across the room, Logan remained motionless. The confident expression he had carried all evening had completely disappeared. The attention he expected for himself had shifted naturally toward the person he believed he had erased from public importance. Moments later, the foundation chairman invited Damien onto the stage to present the evening's largest charitable commitment. Damien accepted the microphone with his usual composed demeanor. "This year's contribution," he announced, "will fund scholarships, neighborhood revitalization, and vocational training programs throughout the state." The audience applauded once more before Damien paused briefly. "However, this initiative will not be directed by me alone. Beginning tonight, Adrian Brooks will serve as strategic advisor for these community projects. His insight has already strengthened several important decisions within our organization, and I believe many more people will benefit from his vision." Surprise spread throughout the ballroom, followed almost immediately by enthusiastic applause. Adrian looked toward Damien with genuine disbelief. They had never discussed such a public announcement. Damien simply offered him a reassuring nod that seemed to say he had earned every word. Reporters quickly recorded the moment, while photographers captured image after image of the two standing together on stage. The evening's narrative changed before everyone's eyes. Adrian was no longer introduced as someone connected to a broken engagement. He was recognized for his own intelligence, compassion, and ability to contribute meaningfully. As guests gathered for the closing reception, several respected business leaders approached Adrian with invitations to future projects and charitable partnerships. Even people who had quietly avoided him only days earlier now waited patiently for an opportunity to speak with him. Logan watched from across the ballroom, finally understanding that influence built on appearances could disappear overnight, while respect earned through character continued to grow. As the evening drew toward its conclusion, Damien's assistant quietly approached the stage and handed him a sealed envelope that had just arrived by private courier. Damien opened it, read the contents once, then looked toward Adrian with thoughtful eyes. "It seems," he said softly, "someone has finally decided to tell the entire truth, and tomorrow morning every newspaper in the city will have the evidence." The morning after the gala began with headlines that spread across every major newspaper, business publication, and local broadcast in the city. The confidential documents delivered the previous evening had been independently verified overnight, confirming that Logan Mercer and several members of his family's executive team had quietly arranged corporate agreements months before the canceled engagement while deliberately presenting a different story to the public. The reports revealed that Adrian had never been included as a true partner in their future plans, but had instead been treated as a convenient public symbol during sensitive negotiations. There were no dramatic confrontations, no raised voices, and no public revenge. The truth spoke clearly enough on its own. Investors began requesting additional reviews. Several business partnerships were temporarily suspended pending internal evaluations, and organizations that valued transparency quietly distanced themselves from the Mercer family. Adrian watched the morning coverage from the sunlit breakfast room at the Callaway estate, surprised by how little satisfaction he felt. The anger he once imagined carrying had disappeared sometime during the previous week. In its place was something quieter and far more valuable: peace. Damien entered carrying 2 cups of coffee before taking the seat across from him. "You seem disappointed," he observed gently. Adrian smiled faintly and shook his head. "Not disappointed, just surprised. I thought seeing all of this would make me feel victorious." Damien waited patiently. Adrian looked toward the gardens beyond the window where the first leaves of autumn drifted gently across the lawn. "Instead, I only feel grateful that I am no longer living inside someone else's plans." Damien nodded with quiet understanding. That is what real freedom usually feels like. During the following months, Adrian embraced his new responsibilities with the Community Foundation, helping design neighborhood revitalization projects and scholarship initiatives that combined thoughtful planning with practical solutions. His background in architecture allowed him to create welcoming public spaces that attracted additional investment while serving local families. The programs expanded faster than anyone expected, earning recognition throughout the state for their measurable results and long-term vision. Damien remained a steady presence beside him, never seeking credit for Adrian's accomplishments and never speaking for him when Adrian could speak for himself. Their partnership grew naturally through shared purpose, mutual respect, and countless ordinary moments that slowly became extraordinary simply because they experienced them together. One crisp autumn evening they returned to the lakeside terrace where they had shared one of their earliest conversations. The water reflected the golden colors of the setting sun, while gentle wind moved through the surrounding trees. Damien reached into the pocket of his coat and removed a small velvet box. Adrian looked at it before quietly meeting Damien's eyes. Damien did not kneel. He did not offer a rehearsed speech. He simply smiled with the same calm sincerity Adrian had come to trust from the very beginning. "The first time we met," Damien said softly, "you had just lost the future someone else promised you. I do not want to promise you a perfect future because neither of us can control tomorrow. But I can promise that every decision I make will respect the person you are and the dreams you choose for yourself. Adrian Brooks, would you honor me by building that future together?" Adrian felt tears gather once again. But unlike the tears that had fallen outside the ballroom days earlier, these carried no sadness. They reflected gratitude, healing, and hope. He smiled through them before giving the only answer his heart had been preparing for all along. "Yes, this time, I am choosing for myself." As the evening sky deepened above the estate, they walked side by side toward the illuminated gardens, leaving behind every expectation that had once tried to define them. The city would always remember the night one engagement ended, but the people who truly knew their story would remember something far more meaningful. A life built on appearances had quietly fallen away, making room for one built on trust, dignity, and the courage to begin again.